If you are visiting Spain for the first time this year, make sure you watch this video because in it, I'll be sharing all sorts of tips and must-knows for first-timers. Hi, I'm Christine from happytowander.com, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing all my best tips for visiting Spain. Spain is honestly one of the most amazing and diverse countries to visit in Europe, and I can't wait to share all these tips with you to ensure that your first trip is an amazing success. Now, let's get started with some Spain travel planning tips. First things first, if you are visiting Spain as part of a trip with other European countries involved, then one program to potentially look into is the Iberia Air Free Stopover program. So long story short, this program allows you to book a free stopover in Madrid for up to 7 nights, which allows you to basically get 2 destinations for the price of one because you're paying for a flight to one place, but you get to stay in Madrid for free up to a week, which is a really sweet deal and definitely a great way to get more value for money. Now, in terms of where to go in Spain, just know that your options are wildly diverse. Spain is one of the largest countries in Western Europe, with 17 autonomous regions made up of 52 different provinces, so needless to say, there is a lot to explore. Within the country of Spain, you'll find amazing coastline, gorgeous mountains, epic cities, unique islands, and mind-blowing scenery all over. So don't assume you can just go to Barcelona once and say you've completed Spain. As well, keep in mind that not only are there tons of different places to visit, they can also vary a lot in terms of climate, culture, customs, and even language. So on that note, when you're creating your Spain itinerary, definitely try to spice it up with some places that are a bit more off the beaten path. If you're trying to decide where to go, one thing I would really recommend is maybe picking one popular destination, let's say Barcelona, and then also adding on some more off the beaten path explorations around that main central core. This way, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. You get a taste of that super famous place, but also you get a chance to explore some places a bit more off the beaten path as well. So when you're building your itinerary, definitely research for places that are a bit more off the beaten path. I'd recommend looking at local Spanish blogs for this purpose, because that way you can see where the locals are vacationing and you can find some cool spots that you probably otherwise wouldn't have heard of. Now, in terms of when to go, summer is definitely not the best time. I think a lot of people tend to romanticize the idea of a Spanish summer, but the truth is a Spanish summer, particularly in the south, is unbearably hot. And also in the month of August, that's when a lot of Spaniards go on vacation, so lots of places will be closed as well. So it's not really the best time to be visiting. Ideally, for the best of weather and crowds, what I would recommend is going in the shoulder seasons from September to November or March to May. These are definitely great times to go. But if you're just going to Spain for some of the cities, honestly, winter is a great time to visit as well. That's when the crowds will be at their lowest and also the prices. Now, if you're having trouble deciding where to go in Spain, one thing I'd recommend you do is search up some of the different festivals that take place across the country. Spain has such a rich cultural heritage, and there are so many cool festivals that take place throughout the year. So there's definitely something that caters to every interest. Some of the most famous ones include La Tomatina, which is known as the largest food fight in the world. But then again, there's like 800 options, so definitely have a Google, see if there's any festivals that really pique your interest and plan your trip around that. Now, another must-know before you visit Spain is to brush up on your Spanish or the local language of the destination that you're visiting. So unlike other countries in Europe, I found that in Spain, English isn't as widely spoken as a second language, so definitely try to learn the basics when it comes to Spanish. It can really help you a lot in terms of navigating the country. Now, it's important to note that depending on where you go in Spain, Spanish as we know it might not necessarily be the main language. So the language that we know as Spanish is known locally as Castellano, and it is spoken widely across the country, but depending on where you go, you might hear more Catalan, like in Catalonia, or you might hear Basque, or Galician, Valencian, etc. So depending on where you're going, it might be worthwhile to research the typical phrases for the local language and not just Castellano. Lastly, on a related note, I want to say if you're doing research for your trip and you're trying to look at ticket prices or you're trying to find out news, one really good thing to do is actually use Google Translate and do all your searching in Spanish rather than in English, because I found that the Spanish versions of websites tend to have a lot more information and you tend to find more current information as well. Now, in terms of getting around Spain from city to city, there's a lot of different options when it comes to public transport. Honestly, there are a ton of airports across Spain that are serviced by budget airlines, so if you're looking for a cheap way to get around, flying is actually not a bad idea. Otherwise, both buses and trains do offer excellent links throughout the country. The only instance where I'd recommend you hire a car is really if you're looking to get a bit more off the beaten path. If you're looking for more natural sights, then in that case, renting a car might make sense, but otherwise, public transportation is perfectly fine. Now, for the train, the best way to save money is definitely by booking as far in advance as possible, especially when it comes to the longer distance trains that are high speed. But if you need the spontaneity, the National Rail Company does have a rail pass that you can use where you basically pre-purchase a set number of trips in advance and you pay one set price. So this can often save you money compared to showing up at the train station the day of and just buying a ticket. So be sure to look into that if you're looking to do some different trips while you're in Spain. Now, if you're visiting multiple countries in Europe, getting a Euro pass might also make sense, but this really depends on your specific situation. So be sure to watch my Euro pass review video for some key considerations to keep in mind. No matter what though, I'd highly recommend getting your tickets online in advance before you go to the train station. And the reason for that is I just find train stations in Spain to be quite confusing trying to buy a ticket in person. I've always had trouble with it. I'm not sure why. So buying buying online in advance really just helps, mitigate that anxiety if you're anxious like I am. Another thing I'll note though is that sometimes I have trouble with the National Rail website in Spain. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I feel like sometimes they have trouble with international cards. So what I've started to do is use third-party websites like Trainline or Omio. Both of these are super easy to use, really user-friendly, and they offer their services in English. So I actually prefer using these to book trains in Spain, just because from my experience, trying to do it on the official rail website and also in person can be really confusing. The last thing I'll say about train travel is just keep in mind if your train is delayed, you might be entitled to compensation. So how much you get back really depends on the type of train and how long you're delayed, but on longer distance trains with the national network, for instance, you can get a full refund if your train is more than 30 minutes delayed. So just keep that in mind. If you're on a budget, that could be a great way to recoup costs. All right, now let's tackle some tips for attractions in Spain. The first thing that I'll say is if you're visiting big attractions, make sure you book your tickets in advance, especially for really big name attractions like the Alhambra, for instance. You sometimes have to book months in advance because that's how busy it gets during peak tourist season. And if you see a skip the line option, always go for that because time is money. Another thing to potentially plan around is free hours. So this is something I haven't really observed in other countries, but in Spain, oftentimes there's different hours of the day where certain attractions will be free. So be sure to look into those if you want to save a bit of money during your stay. Another way to save money is looking out for city passes or combo deals. They have a lot of these all across the country, especially in touristy cities like Madrid or Barcelona. In Barcelona, for instance, you have something called the Barcelona card, which basically gives you access to a bunch of the different attractions in the city for a set price. So if you're planning on doing a lot of sightseeing, going to a lot of paid attractions, then it might be worthwhile looking into whether or not they have one of these combo cards, just because they can save you a ton of money. All right, now let's move on to the fun stuff, food and drink tips for Spain. Now, first things first, know that regionally, cuisines can really differ across Spain. I know in North America, we think of Spanish food as tapas and paella and sangria, and that's it. But really, there's a lot of cultural diversity within the country itself. So make sure that you research the regional specialties specific to the place that you're going, because that way you're gonna get to enjoy a lot more dishes that you probably never have heard of before. On a similar note, I know that Spain is super famous for sangria, but it's actually interesting because not a lot of locals really drink sangria. Oftentimes they find it overpriced, and in place of it, they drink something called tinto de verano, which is honestly very similar to sangria, except it doesn't have the fruit. So it's made up of wine, soda, and ice, and it's honestly super delicious and much cheaper than sangria, so be sure to keep an eye out for that on the menu. Otherwise, just drinking wine is very popular and affordable as well. Now, when in Spain, it's also very important that you are able to recognize tourist trap restaurants because many of them are all over the place, especially in popular tourist cities. So needless to say, you don't want to get ripped off by a tourist trap restaurant, so here's a few different ways that you can recognize them. The first one is if they advertise free Wi-Fi in really big letters, or if they have really large pictures of their food, or if the menu is written in English and a bunch of other languages. That's probably not a great sign that it's going to be the best meal of your life. Oftentimes, if they're located in a really busy area that's close to tourist attractions, that's not a great sign either. And the nail in the coffin for me is if there's a host outside that's like really aggressively trying to get you to sit down at their terrace, odds are the food there is probably not going to be the best. Definitely expand your search and try to go to places that are a bit farther from the main tourist drag, and you're going to be able to find food that's way better and more affordable as well. Now let's talk about tapas. Tapas are small dishes in Spain that are meant to be shared, and they are often known abroad as the quintessential Spanish meal. Of course, what's offered at tapas restaurants does vary regionally, but there are a few items that are universal. The first one is patatas bravas, which are fried potatoes that are slathered in this very delicious spicy tomato sauce. And these are super simple and super delicious, and they're so ubiquitous, in fact, that often what people will do is they'll use this dish as kind of like a tester dish to see what the quality of that restaurant is like. So often they'll order some patatas bravas for the table, and if it's good, it's usually an indicator that other dishes at that restaurant are also good. So be sure to use that trick and try it out. Now, one of the biggest regional differences when it comes to tapas is whether or not you need to pay for them. So in some regions, it's actually still common for you to get a free tapa when you order a drink, but in other places, tapas are more or less just dishes that you would typically order from any restaurant. So it's important before you go to kind of research what the customs are in your destination so that you're not just sat there waiting for your free tapa that's never gonna come. Similar to tapas are pinchos, which originate from the Basque Country in the north of Spain. So if you're in the north of Spain, you'll often find pinchos on the menu as well. And these are very similar to tapas in that they're little bites, but often they're served on sticks and they're never free with a drink. So just keep that in mind. Now, for many visitors, a huge culture shock is just how late people in Spain eat dinner. So depending on where you are, it's not uncommon to be starting dinner after 10 o'clock, which I know is way later than I typically eat my dinner. And so just be prepared to eat a little bit later than you're used to. Now, a lot of restaurants will even close between lunch and dinner. So from 4 4 to 8 p.m. So just be sure to plan around that if you're the type of person that gets hangry. Now, another common culture shock for visitors is just the pace of meals and also the pace of service in Spain, because meals tend to be really savored over several hours and servers will never rush you, which in my opinion is a huge plus, but if you're from a country that's not used to that, that might be quite a culture shock. Now, this is why you definitely need to flag your server down if you want the bill or if you want anything extra. They're never gonna come back and check on you because that's just not what they do. So if you're wanting anything else or you're hoping to get the bill, just be sure to flag them down. Otherwise, the bill is just never gonna come. Now, in terms of water at restaurants, make sure you're ordering something called un vaso de agua, so a glass of water. Otherwise, if you just order water, it's often assumed that they're gonna bring you a bottled version, which can cost a bit more money. And if you're looking for a deal, make sure to look out for something called the menu del dia, which is like the menu of the day or the combo of the day. This is often a set meal that includes a starter, a main course, a drink, a dessert, and a coffee for a really good price. All right, now let's move on to some culture and etiquette tips for Spain. As I alluded to before, one of the most important things to keep in mind really is that Spain is made up of so many different diverse regions. And many of these regions will have their own proud national identity. So the traditions that you might observe in Andalusia, for instance, aren't really going to be things that you see up in Catalonia. A really big example of this is flamenco. A lot of visitors come from abroad hoping to catch a flamenco performance, but really this is an Andalusian tradition. It's not something that you would see in Barcelona. And if you do find a place in Barcelona that does it, it's probably because it's catering to tourists. So just keep in mind that each region tends to have its own cultural traditions. So before you head out and try to find a cool cultural experience, make sure it's the right one. In terms of tipping, tips are definitely not expected in Spain to the same extent as North America, but these days a lot of tourists are tipping, so people working in touristy areas are starting to expect the tip a little bit more. First things first though, make sure that there isn't already a service charge that's added to the bill. Sometimes this is already added, in which case you don't need to tip extra. Otherwise, for good service, 5 to 10% is definitely good enough. All right, last but not least, here are some tips to keep in mind once you arrive in Spain. Now, the first is to plan around siesta time. I think a lot of visitors have already heard of the siesta, but contrary to popular belief, it's not actually just about a nap. It's not like everybody in Spain takes 2 hours off in the middle of the day to go take a nap. Really, what it refers to is just kind of a break in the middle of the day where people might be able to rest, have a long lunch. So a lot of shops and potentially attractions will be closed during this time, so just be sure to plan around that. Now, another must-do is to bring cash with you. So Spain is still predominantly a cash society. Some places will take card, but really you'll get by a lot easier if you have cash. But on that note, bring smaller bills and also don't bring more cash than you can afford to lose, because unfortunately in busier places in Spain, pickpockets are definitely an issue, especially in Barcelona. The pickpockets in Barcelona are honestly next level. I do have a full video all about how to avoid pickpockets in Europe if you want to watch that, just to get a feel for all the different techniques that they use. But generally speaking, just make sure when you're in a busy place to always have an eye and a hand over your valuables, and also to just keep your distance, because for the most part, pickpockets thrive on distraction. So just kind of have your wits about you and make sure that you're vigilant when you're in busier areas, especially train stations and popular tourist destinations. Now, another tip in terms of what to wear is to keep in mind that Spanish locals tend to dress for the season rather than for the weather. So for me personally, if I'm visiting Spain in the off season, if it's like 20 degrees, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna wear a dress, maybe with a jean jacket or something, because to me, that is the appropriate temperature to be wearing a dress. But in Spain, they dress according to the season, not to the weather. So if you wanna blend in, you shouldn't be wearing summer clothes even when the temperatures are summer temperatures for you. But at the end of the day, I don't really think it matters that much. So just wear what makes you comfortable, but just keep in mind if you're trying to blend in a little bit more, Spaniards tend to dress for the season, not for the weather. And lastly, be aware that in Spain, it can get a little bit noisy. So unlike Central European countries where people tend to keep their voices down, and if you speak too loudly, like North Americans often do, it kind of disrupts the peace. In Spain, that is not a concern. Spain tends to be quite a noisy place in the best possible way. People will be speaking loudly, there's gonna be music. It's quite chaotic, but embrace the chaos, embrace the noise. It's definitely really fun. All right, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed those tips. And as usual, if you have any more comments or questions, be sure to leave them in the comments. And for more practical travel videos just like this one, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.